Next on the agenda is agenda changes. We do have one. Item G, refuse tax deed. We're going to pull from tonight's agenda and move it to the next meeting.
Actually, that is the June 27 meeting. The
June
second meeting
27th.
of June.
Which has
Okay.
been,
All right, so is there anything that you have to add with regard to that, Mr. McNutt?
no, yeah, it's the June 27th meeting because we're waiting for some reports back from the state on a couple of the properties.
Okay.
And we just need to get that information from them.
Okay, so June 27th. So much. Good luck on Saturday.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else from the Citizens Forum? Yes. This is a non-agenda item, Mr. Feline? Yeah.
Jim Feline, Ward 2. I wanted to speak a bit about the issue of maintenance at the community center and the Parks Department. I have to confess I did not watch the entire Saturday session from start to finish. I try to do my best, but I did tune in for the Parks presentation, and Mr. Dameron asked a question about maintenance, and correct me if I misstate what you said, but basically his question was there had been concern about proper maintenance, and he wanted Mr. Brislin to talk a little bit about what he was experiencing with that. I think as a department head, he gave the only answer he could, really, which was he's doing the best he can, he and his people, with the resources he's given. I'm here to say that, and this is just me speaking, those resources are woefully inadequate. We're doing an abysmal job with both the parks, the outdoor parks, and the community center, and so my overall point is to urge you to revisit that, and rather than cut the budget, let's figure out a way to properly maintain what we have. But I did a little bit of research, and thank you. What this is sort of just a rough comparison of some other large buildings around. So you folks all know this, but for the benefit of the audience, the Claremont Parks Department consists of, the physical assets consist of the community center, which is about 52,000 square feet, well over 600 acres of outdoor parkland with a number of buildings on many of those parks. Maintenance of that infrastructure is done by 2.5 full-time people, supervisor and then 1.5 maintenance workers. So then I just went to some other kind of larger buildings and started with the school system. On the back of the sheet is a spreadsheet of what they have in each of the buildings. A couple of things sort of jump out there. The elementary schools are smaller, each of them, than by probably 25 or 30% than the community center, and have, in comparison's sake, more maintenance staff. So that's kind of for informational purpose. The bank itself, the Claremont Savings Bank, it's a 48,000 square foot building, and they have 4 personnel for maintenance. Carter Witherell Center up in Lebanon, 3 full-time people for a 43,000 square foot building. Again, our community center is 52,000, and then you add to that 600 acres of outdoor parks, which the outdoor piece of this, I think, is the key. None of these other facilities have anything like that they're responsible for. So we're asking 2.5 people to do an impossible job, frankly. Our park system is something we should be proud of, but we need to take care of it. We're on the same road that we were with the Goodwin Community Center, which led to the building being condemned. If we take care of, basically the community center now is a big metal building. It's a metal structure. We can, if we properly maintain it, it'll last indefinitely. If we don't, it won't. So I really think we as a community should figure out a way to do better about this. I was going to change gears a little bit. Do I need to sit down and stand back up, or
No.
No,
keep going?
keep going.
I've been here before on the piece of land across from Monadnock Park that the city owns. Maybe I'm too fond of handouts, I don't know. This is something I've passed out to the council the other few times I've been here on this, but there are several of you who are newer members. I've been working on this for a long time, and it's basically, I don't want to take up too much of your time with something you already know, but again, for the viewing folks, the city owns 7 acres in the middle of that cornfield across from the park. We had it entered into a agreement with the farmer that owns it and subdivided off a section. We're going to add acreage to Monadnock Park and have a river walk. And in exchange, he would get full ownership of the city-owned parcel. And that agreement was came apart, and mainly because of him, never got effectuated. So we're sitting here 15, 16 years later with kind of nothing happening. It's a golden opportunity to add significant land onto the Monadnock Park for no money. And I just would urge us to figure out a way to keep this issue moving forward if we could.
Okay. Mr. McNutt, did you have anything, an update on that? Because I know you've been working on it.
Sure. Well, I don't remember how long ago it was. It was this year, so the beginning of this year. I think you and I think Alan, were you there as well? No?
Maybe.
Yeah, I know my memory's getting a little foggy on that one. So we met with Mr. McLaughlin and his son, and from what I understand, we reached a resolution. We've sent that off to legal counsel. They're drafting it up. We had something sent back to us and sent it off to Ed McLaughlin, and they looked at it. I think they had some type of language change on a sentence, and we sent it back to legal counsel. And I just have to double check on if what they had an opinion about that sentence change. But from what I understand,
It's close to being
the issue
resolved.
is pretty much resolved.
Okay.
In the same way that we had agreed on 18 years ago?
I doubt it.
See, that, I don't know why it can't be shared publicly. There's, I'm sure, good reason, but that's just not acceptable. I mean, this guy has used 7 acres of taxpayer land for free to grow corn for.
So let me just, maybe that's a conversation better that you may have with the city manager, because I don't know what the final outcome of that agreement is, and maybe that's been resolved, so we can't make assumptions without seeing the
Right.
finalized
And
agreement.
I mean, I don't have all the language of that thing in my
We're
head
also out
right
of
here.
time
So.
on this.
Yeah. So I know we're moving forward on it, we haven't forgotten it, but I would recommend that if you have questions, you know.
Yeah, happy to meet.
Right.
Okay.
Anybody else on a non-agenda
Agenda
is
item?
the approval of the multi-year lease agreement for the police fleet. So you have that motion on your table. So somebody would like to read this motion, please? Okay, Assistant Mayor Dameron.
Yeah. Motion to authorize multi-year lease agreement for police department vehicles. The Claremont City Council hereby authorizes the city manager to enter into a multi-year lease agreement for vehicles and equipment for a term not to exceed 3 years for the Claremont Police Department. The expenditure for each year of the lease not to exceed $47,000 for the first year of the lease term. Said costs included in the 2019 budget. The proposed lease agreement shall contain a termination clause in the event of non-appropriation of specific funds for any subsequent year of the lease.
Second.
Okay, so Assistant Mayor Dameron read that motion, and Councilor Kolowski seconded it. Is there any questions for Ms. Walter?
How are you this evening?
Just fine, thank you.
Fantastic. No further questions?
How many vehicles does this include? 5.
And I'd like to say I appreciate the justification that was added to the motion in our packet. That makes it very helpful to us. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda under new business is the authorization to apply for LCHIP grant for City Hall improvements and LCHIP final report update. This is in your packet. And Director Merrill's here to talk to us about this.
Yes. So I included a memo in your packet to give you just a little bit of background on the program. When you transfer any real estate in New Hampshire right now, you pay a $25 LCHIP fee every time you record something, and all of that money goes into the LCHIP program, and that's really what funds the program. And it is designed it can be used for conservation, rehabilitation, or preservation of land and buildings. Last year, we contacted them about getting some construction funding for City Hall. At the time, and we've got obviously Mary and the city manager working this building all the time, but we had a lot of feedback on the master plan process about particularly the roof. The roof is leaking in the building. You had a bad leak just 2 days ago.
New leak.
So early estimates on a new copper roof were about $700,000 to $800,000. So I think we were all a little bit concerned about how we were going to approach this. So in any case, we called the LCHIP folks, and they said that if we were going to apply for serious construction money, that we had to have a historic assessment done of the building in advance. So we applied last year for the assessment money, and what you have in front of you is the draft report from the architect of historic. He's a historic building architect. He did a historic assessment of the property. We do not have the final report yet. The draft came in, and we had a couple of things that we wanted him to include. One was sort of a notable absence of ADA issues that we wanted included, and the other was Tom Krebs, our project manager, when he was doing the math on the windows, his numbers were $50,000 different. So we had a couple of areas we wanted him to look into and send us a final report. That hasn't come in yet. So what you have in front of you is what we're looking at as well. So the grant period for this round is the middle of June, and what we're doing here today really is to talk to you about applying for construction grant. And the report, I think the report is pretty clear on a number of priorities. The roof obviously is a big one, but we've also, windows is a big one. I mean, these are, this is a beautiful building, and these are beautiful windows, and it have to be maintained, and frankly, I think that there's a lot of heat loss through them right now. The historic standards don't allow you to remove windows and replace them with new windows, so these windows have to be repaired in place, and in a lot of historic buildings now, the storm windows that are added are not on the exterior of the building, they're on the interior of the building. So, and it's also, the report outlines some issues with mechanical, electrical, plumbing work. The one thing I wish it had addressed, but he probably wasn't here on a proper day, is the building has a somewhat serious odor that's pretty pervasive and makes your eyes run sometimes, that the city and the DPW and others looking at it have not yet sort of figured out why it's happening, and it's sporadic. So in any case, there are a number of things outlined in the report. There are a few things I've never thought of before. And some of you maybe were here when this was done, but I never thought much about what's above the dropped ceiling, so I found that part of the report kind of interesting. So in any case, questions, or I think that this is a 50% match. It does allow for staff time to be a match. It can be included as a match. But the way that we've written this motion is, you know, if you authorize us to apply for the grant, we'd be coming back to you if we are fortunate and receive the grant, and you would be looking at accepting and expending at that time, and what that match would be.
And we have an initial match component in
The current
this year's
budget.
budget proposal.
Yeah.
That's the 140,000.
Right. Questions for the director?
Just one general observation, CMK Architects were the people putting this together.
Yes.
Yeah, they were the architects that were in place when we did the school consolidation plan in 1995.
Oh, no
So
kidding.
they were very good.
Yeah.
So I have one comment, or actually two comments, that should we get this LCHIP grant for construction, I think this is going to be the first substantial LCHIP grant we've been awarded since 2003 or something like that, so this is huge.
It would be. And the amount of work that you need to do is a lot of money we're talking about. So if you can get 50% of it grant funded, that's a big savings.
And my other comment is, we're applying for the, or you're applying for the grant now, but once, I'm being optimistic, once we're awarded the grant, I'm assuming that you're having conversations with the Opera House Board and Executive Director, because I know they have lots of experience about dealing with the leaks and stage damage done to the stage and all of that, so.
Yeah, and they did review the whole building, so including the Opera House.
Right.
One thing we were trying to figure out was sprinkling, because there's been a lot of discussion about sprinkling the building, and it is in this, it's
Yes.
recommended in this report. But in the auditorium upstairs, they recommend a different type
Yeah,
of thing.
that's what we were discussing
Yeah,
earlier,
we're-
is what is beam detection
Yeah.
and different technologies that are recommended
Right.
in the report that we were,
Right.
you know, that are new.
Yeah, so I serve on the board of directors over at the Opera House, and, you know, when we first got the short version of this, you know, I was very interested in the fact that it's the first time I've ever read that, you know, no, we're not mandated to have a sprinkler system, because we were trying to protect the historic nature of the building.
Right.
And so that was, and it was refreshing to see that we had another option to repairing the copper dome, other than spending $750,000.
Yeah, that was significant, hearing that in this report, that there was an alternative that would meet National Historic Standards.
It's one of the cases where it pays to wait,
Yeah, based on.
because the technology wasn't available back then.
Right, right.
Yeah, but the building, I'm not sure everybody knows, but the building is in the National Historic Register, so it's pretty significant, and the state considers it significant as well.
That's an additional 20% we can apply for. State historic credits.
Federal.
Yeah, I'm sorry, federal historic credits.
Counselor, don't know who was first. Counselor Kier,
Oh, I was just going to make a motion if.
is there a question before we make a
I
motion?
was going to make a motion.
Okay, you guys are competing.
Fine, it's
Go
absolutely
ahead,
fine.
Go ahead, Counselor Kier.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the New Hampshire Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, the LCHIP application. The City of Claremont, or the Claremont City Council hereby authorizes the city manager or his designees to undertake all actions and execute all documents as may be required to apply for the LCHIP funding for the purpose of the City Hall Claremont Opera House restoration and rehabilitation, the project. Upon notice that the project has been selected, the council will entertain a resolution to raise appropriate funds for the project, of which 50% shall be reimbursed to the city from LCHIP funding.
Is there a second?
Seconds.
So Counselor Kier read the motion. It was seconded by Counselor O'Hearn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item D, Resolution 2018-33. Apply for, accept, and expend Plan New Hampshire Municipal Technical Assistant Grant. This is also slated for a public hearing. You can find this on page 76 of your packet.
Correct. So this particular grant was timely. The master plan finished the housing chapter in January. And the master plan housing strategies include enhancing the existing housing stock and planning for new housing development. And goal 2 of that plan was utilizing municipal planning tools, regulations, and partnerships to ensure new housing development meets Claremont's long-term housing vision. So right about the time that this, that the plan was being finished, Plan New Hampshire announced a technical assistance grant to do just that. So these funds are available for us to engage a planning consultant to come into the community to look at our zoning, our subdivision regulations, and make sure that those regulations as they pertain to housing really work the way we want them to. It's been a while since housing in particular and our zoning ordinance, at least the 15 years I've been here, there really hasn't been any substantive change in it. And yet, you know, if you look around us, there are different types of housing choices that people are making. I think about Harvest Hill, for example, up near Alice Peck Day. You know, those types of things we wouldn't have thought about 15 or 20 years ago because they didn't exist. So in any case, that's what this grant is about. It's a $20,000 grant application. There was a $5,000 match, and I think you see in your packet our city planner made a call to the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation to see if we could get that, if we could get a match, if we got received the funding. And so I've included in your packet a letter from them that we have been approved for the $5,000 from the Thomas Hass Fund of the Charitable Foundation. So this particular motion, unlike the last one, is a motion that would allow us to apply, and if we receive it, to move forward with executing documents and hiring a consultant.
Any questions for the director before we read the resolution? I have one, and that is, it would be helpful to us since we are trying to review through the policy committee. We're trying to adhere to the charter, which says we review these policies every 5 years. So it would be most helpful if we could have a list from you what ordinances you are going to focus this grant on, just so that we know that is being dealt with, and that if somewhere along the process, I know that it's mentioned in one of these letters, there's going to be a lot of collaboration with different elements. It might be helpful to bring in a member of the policy committee or whoever,
Sure.
just so that we can keep abreast of what's happening.
Okay.
Who would like to read the resolution? Assistant Mayor Dameron.
Resolution 2018-33. Plan New Hampshire Community Planning Grant. Be it resolved by the Claremont City Council after a public hearing duly noticed that, whereas the City of Claremont is applying for a municipal technical assistance grant in the amount of $20,000 from Plan New Hampshire to hire a consultant to review and recommend changes to the city housing ordinances and draft amendments to the city code to improve housing development prospects. And whereas the required local match of 25% of the grant award, or $5,000, shall be a cash match and may be provided by the city or from other funding sources. And whereas the city has received a grant from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation on behalf of the Thomas Hass Fund in the amount of $5,000 to cover such match, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council hereby authorizes the city manager or his designees to undertake all actions and execute all documents as may be required to accept the specified grant funds and to implement the funded project in an amount not to exceed the grant awards as stated above. And be it further resolved to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 to come from Plan New Hampshire grant funding and New Hampshire Charitable Foundation to have no impact on the tax rate for the purpose of review and recommendations of city housing ordinances. And be it further resolved that the city manager or his designees are hereby authorized to undertake all actions as may be required to implement this resolution. 2/3 vote required, dated this 23rd day of May, 2018, the city of Claremont, county of Sullivan, state of New Hampshire.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it was read by Assistant Mayor Dameron and seconded by Councilor Stone. Is there any further discussion before I open up for a public hearing?
Long time coming.
Okay, no, I'll open it up for a public hearing. Anybody would like to speak to this resolution? No? So I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. One more time before we take the roll call. Any questions? Nope. Ms. Russell?
Counselor Sard?
Yes.
Counselor Ahern?
Yes.
Counselor Stone?
Yes.
Assistant Mayor Dameron?
Yes.
Counselor Kier?
Yes.
Counselor Kolowski?
Yes.
Counselor Pope?
Yes.
Mayor Lovett?
Yes. Thank you. And if you could, Director Merrill, thank the city planner for getting that grant. Thank you. Next, yes, Councilor Kolowski.
I didn't pick up on this earlier, but can we switch around E and F? We have members of the Conservation Commission here tonight with us. In the interest of getting them out of here, and not having to stay with us later.
We can,
But they'd so enjoy it.
Unless,
We can-
unless they really want to. I mean, I don't, who am I to?
we can, were you going to cover the Whitewater? Yeah, that's fine. Is that okay with the council? We'll just switch it. All right, so we'll move on to the Conservation Commission request to reassign oversight of rail trail to Parks and Rec. Okay, is there somebody, oh, yes.
Wait, who's steering?
Sorry to do that to you.
That's okay. Who is here? Gary Dickerman, Ward 2, and current chairman of the Conservation Commission. And as pointed out in the letter that we sent to the mayor and council on April 17th, we would like the council to reassign jurisdiction or oversight of the rail trail to the Parks and Rec department. The current commission feels that the trail is a recreational asset and not so much a natural resource. We met several months ago with members of the Parks and Rec board, and they were enthusiastic about trying to find ways to fund improvements. And they really had a much larger interest in doing so than we do. We feel other areas that we need to expend our energy on, and since it is a recreational trail, that's our reasoning behind the request. And there's a few of us here. If you have any questions, we have some historical information available by Mr. Wood, who's been on the commission for decades, basically. So if anyone wants to go back that far. So that's our request.
So in your packet, you had a lot of background information. The legal counsel was there, from what I read, was that there was no reason why this could not be done. So, any concerns, thoughts, comments? Yes, Councilor Kolowski.
I've had the privilege of serving on the Conservation Commission alongside several of these folks, and I have to take it that what they're requesting is in the best interest of the city overall. I fully trust their opinion on this and judgment, and I would be for this change.
Anybody else on the council? Yes, Assistant Mayor Dameron.
Yeah, just a general question. From the Conservation Commission, have there been in the past any budgeted funds spent in the upkeep or monitoring of the trails, or?
I believe previous to my time on the commission, there may have been a grant or two that was received and expended on the trails. But I think most of the upkeep in the past has been done by the ATV club.
Okay.
So,
And/or grants, which,
yes,
okay.
yes.
Councilor O'Hearn?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And this may not be for you to answer, but I recall that there was a dispute about the usage of the trail back in years ago, or maybe
Yes.
5 years ago. Has that been resolved?
That, I believe that's tied to, still pending. We had to get a federal waiver. I don't think that process has been completed. Anything else? Okay, is there anybody, to be fair to the people in the audience who've been working on this issue for so long, Conservation Commission, is there anything that any of the members would like to say?
Steve Wood, Ward 3, presently assistant or vice chair of the Conservation Commission. I think Claremont, and I guess I, at this point, have the distinction of being the present longest-serving Conservation Commission member. But notwithstanding, I'm fairly certain that it was sometime before my tenure with the Conservation Commission that the city took ownership of the abandoned rail line. And so I'm not particularly knowledgeable about whatever events transpired at that point. My impression, and I want to emphasize that's all it is that at least a few of the members of the Conservation Commission at that time apparently advocated, if you will, for the Conservation Commission to take charge in the form of at least starting with some improvements on it to convert it in the process of converting it from an abandoned rail bed to a recreational trail. There was a lot of early support, as I recall, from both the Snowmobile Club and the ATV Club. Financially, through grants that they were able to obtain, as well as manpower to help affect some of those repairs and changes, like, for example, decking the bridge, the railroad bridge, crossing the Sugar River behind Washington Street. And at that time, it was one of the, I think it's safe to say, it was one of the main focus projects of the Conservation Commission. And we, maybe this isn't the right choice of words, but we, as a result, I'm sure, kind of inherited, if you will, the responsibility of the rail trail, of getting the city's request, if not blessing, to continue to oversee whatever management of the rail trail would occur. And we did that for a number of years, and then, of course, as you all know, the long simmering issue of ATV use, not snowmobiles per se, but ATVs, came up and finally came to a head, and that is still apparently in limbo as far as us being able to, the city being able to successfully obtain a waiver to allow ATV use of the trail. I don't know where that stands, but at any rate, I think it's safe to say that effectively ended the support of the ATV Club for any kind of trail maintenance that was being done. Also, another factor that I think plays into this is the very recent revising the city's master plan. And the Conservation Commission was very definitely involved, as were a number of other commissions and boards in the city, with our part in that. And we realized, at least I certainly realized, and I think we all did, that our charge as a Conservation Commission for the city of Claremont involves a heck of a lot more than the rail trail. A lot of issues which, quite frankly, we had been neglecting. So we're presently trying to remedy that, to address these other issues that, and areas that no other board in the city can or will. And so we felt in looking at all of the issues that we, and possible projects and so forth that we could take on, that the rail trail really didn't warrant any degree of the, very little, of the degree of input that we had been giving it. That's not to say it's not important, but I don't think it's an appropriate role for the Conservation Commission. So that's essentially why we're asking, because you, representing the city of Claremont, are the owners. Neither us nor the Parks and Rec Department nor any other board owns, exclusively owns, if you will, the rail trail. It's city property, and so we felt that it was we were obliged to come to see you folks to see about having that administrative oversight, if you will, of the rail trail officially designated to the Parks and Rec Department.
Thank you.
So that's it. Yeah.
Yes, Councilor Osari?
My only concern is, wouldn't it impact more manpower, more equipment, more hours on the Parks and Recreation budget? If the Parks and Recreation...
Well, fortunately, they have a budget.
Okay, you wouldn't...
As opposed to us.
Wouldn't touch it?
Our budget depends, is solely dependent at this point on how many people owning current use land in Claremont decide to sell it or otherwise do something that disqualifies it from continuing to qualify for current use, at which time they would pay, or the new owner would pay, a penalty. The Conservation Commission receives a portion of that current use penalty tax when land is changed or taken out of current use or disqualified from current use. Those changes have not occurred for, I think, probably the last 6 to 7 years or more. So we've been working on a fixed fund amount with no income, except for interest, which can get you a cup of coffee.
Mayor Damon?
Yeah, I guess the question probably is more for Director Brislin. If this indeed takes place and the transfer does take place, we've talked earlier this evening about the fact that as far as Parks and Rec are concerned in the community center, your budget's tight. Does this transfer make tighter snap, or what happens?
So as a recreation department, we value the rail trail. It's a great asset to the community. It has great potential. You know, we do manage, as we talked about earlier, you know, we do manage approximately 600 acres of park, some which has extensive trail systems, like Moody Park. That being said, my concern, you know, so the rail trail could be a good fit with our department. That being said, I do have some concerns of adding more assets to our department, but our resources or the budget keeps going down every year. I believe this last budget hearing, it was tentatively approved that, you know, you cut $5,000 from the parks budget. So I would tread lightly and make sure that we examine that if we were to take ownership of the rail trail and that we, you know, we're able to properly maintain it and be able to do what expectation, everybody understands the expectations and what we'll be doing moving forward. Because we talked about the manpower earlier, and you know, we keep getting more and more assets added, and funding seems to be going down every year.
So, Councilor O'Hearn?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. President, was there any discussion or research about any city ordinance, if this was transferred to Parks and Recs, would it prohibit OHRVs such as the snowmobiles, or is that going to be affected?
I don't know if I know the answer answer to that. I don't think usage would, I think usage would stay the same. I don't think there'd be a change of.
Counselor Kowalski?
I think Director Brislin is correct, and I think if this happens, we need to have a clear understanding of what is expected. Like currently, I guess my expectation would be in this budget going forward that we wouldn't be adding funds to maintain the rail trail, just as there's no funds to maintain it now. So any work that currently happens, if they did nothing, if Parks and Rec did nothing to the rail trail, it's currently what happens now.
Right.
So I just make that clear that it, in my mind, it shouldn't be anybody calling and saying like the rail trail is in deplorable condition, let's throw city funds at it, because there are no funds to do that with. And I did have a question as far as, I guess it's just housekeeping, but when the Snowmobile Club comes forward for permission and then they're granted insurance coverage by, like the ATVs are, that would still come to the council for approval, I assume.
Yeah.
And then the second part of that is, and I don't know if this still occurs, the Conservation Commission would have to answer this, but the Snowmobile Club would come forward and request permission to take down certain sections of the actual rail itself for crossing by Burger King. Would that be a request that goes to the Parks and Rec Board or solely the discretion of the Parks and Rec Director?
So say that again, just so.
The Snowmobile Club used to come for permission to the Conservation Commission and ask for the removal. They would do it themselves. They would just have to ask permission to take down a section of the rail. And it's so they can make a cross by Burger King. And they would replace the rail themselves, but that was a yearly permission that happened. And I don't know if that still occurs. But if I'm wondering if that would go to Parks and Rec Board as a request, or that would just be a phone call to Director Brislin, because he'd probably also have this question going forward when this request is made in the winter.
What if we do this, because Conservation Commission is a different type of board than Parks and Rec? They're a land use board, they have different statutory authority. So we will just run that question by legal counsel, Mr. McNutt, and make sure that we do it correctly. But to your earlier point, there isn't, from the Conservation Commission, there's no effort or expenses being done at this point in time to maintain the rail trail from.
Not specifically, no, other than trying to coordinating trash pickup, a couple of times a year perhaps, but no maintenance per se, no.
Okay.
Just as a quick follow-up, there is the East Street Bobby Woodman grant that's going out to bid in the fall. So the section of the trail from Pleasant Street to Chestnut Street will be redone as part of that grant. So that's resurfacing of that section of the trail.
The whole, through Broad Street, the whole, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Councilor Kowalski?
She had a question. Go ahead. You haven't spoken yet, so go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of note that I agreed that they didn't have a budget previously going towards this, and so maybe immediately no funds need to be allocated to it, but I don't necessarily agree that it's not something that shouldn't be thought of as it's a new asset, and we will eventually need to be putting some funds towards it to continue its maintenance, to upgrade it as needed. I mean, I think everybody knows we take great pride in all of our parks. They look gorgeous, and it's a huge draw for our city. I think that the trail, if it were to be moved over to parks, would be the same way, and we would need to think about allocating funds eventually for it.
Wait a minute. Councilor Kowalski, did you? Okay. Mr. McNutt?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Councilor Kier. I kind of view this as the state or the company, somebody gave up this rail bed, just like they did all across the country. The federal government created this program to sell it back to states and communities. But this thing was a physical thing in Claremont. We were going to have it no matter what. it was either just going to be an abandoned rail line or it was going to be a rail trail. So ultimately, you know, we would have some type of responsibility towards this land that's in Claremont. It happens to be a rail trail. We got federal funds for it. I agree with Councilor Kier. We're going to have to come up with a way, I think, as a community, to maintain this rail trail, and over time have different discussions about what we want the rail trail to become as different opportunities present themselves. But as Director Merrill was mentioning, I mean, there is frequently grants put out for rail trails. So, yeah.
Councilor Pulaski, wait a minute, Councilor Pope?
As clarification on this, don't we already own this rail
Yeah.
trail?
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
already an
It's
asset,
just
right?
jurisdiction.
Yep.
But, so just the jurisdiction we're trying to transfer, because the city took the original grant, the $250,000 grant, not the Conservation Commission, for the rail trail, which is the grant that's in dispute that Councilor O'Hearn talks about right now. So, really, it's just a situation of they're just changing the potential funding source from the
Conservation.
the Conservation Commission and the current use fund to the city if need be, which right now is at zero, as Mr. Klosky says. So really, all said and done, we're kind of on the hook for the thing anyway if things really go south on it. So,
Councilor Pulaski?
I just wanted to know with this change, and this may be a attorney question, but there's been conversation at Conservation Commission level about potential encroachment on that land. Does Parks and Rec now take the ball on that, or is that just being directed as legal?
Yeah, I will have to get you an answer on that.
Yes.
Eileen Skronsky, Ward 1. I just want you to know that we often have volunteers that maintain certain parts of it, and we.
And you are a member of the Conservation?
I'm a
Yes.
member of the Conservation Commission, and I think we work with DPW, and we may get the bags and lots of things that on the trail, bring it to a point, and they pick up the trash that we get. So we work with volunteers. Also, we have a school teacher on the board, and we work with the schools too for volunteers. And last year, one of the a policewoman that had a group of children that were interested in doing volunteer work came to us too. So we do work with volunteers.
Yes. And I've been one of them, my
Mhm.
husband and I cleaning
Exactly.
up, and I know churches in the community have also volunteered to clean up the rail trail at
Mhm.
different times. So I think there are ways, well, transferring jurisdiction, if that's the way the council wants to go. Whatever we do, there are many ways to address the issue of maintenance. And to Director Brislin's point, he doesn't have the manpower resources right now to take on that additional.
I guess what I'm saying is we could work
Yes.
with him, you know.
Well, I think I can speak for the commission in saying that we would very much be willing to continue working with Parks and Rec Department. I mean, we have been up until now, and that wouldn't change. But
Collaboration.
it just, yeah.
What a
yeah,
great
yeah.
thing.
So, that's, yeah.
Before we take the motion, or make the motion, is Councilor
Just-
Pope?
So the current use fund that, for the sale of the land, which hasn't probably happened in a while, as you said, but if there wasn't that sponsors the Conservation Commission and the wish of the Conservation Commission, not just the rail trails?
Correct. That's, yeah, that was designated as a source of funds for a portion of that, if and when it would happen in a given year. For various projects of the Conservation Commission, right? Not just specifically the rail trail.
Okay. Thank you.
They have many duties, conservation
Understand.
easements, lots of different things, that invasive species, that they have, like Mr. Wood has said in the past, they just haven't been able to get to. So, in your letter from the chair of the Conservation Commission is a recommended motion. If that's the motion that you want to move forward on, somebody could read it. Counselor Kowalski?
Oh, I just had a question. I'll be honest with you, I'm not terribly comfortable going forward with the motion tonight while we have lingering questions. I thought kind of this was a dialogue where we would be able to research this a little bit on our end. My gut tells me that regardless of the conversations we've had, maybe at a budget which we're going through now, maybe we look at adding a certain dollar amount, $1,000, $1,500 into Parks and Rec to at least cover something on the rail trail. I think that I agree with transferring it over, but I'm having an issue with, it may not be this council, but I think Parks and Rec, we're adding more to it, and they're going to be expected to maintain that somehow. Even if it's a simple phone call by a resident complaining that there's trash on the trail, and I just like a little more clarity to this. And we're in budget now, so it might be.
I would, personally, I would be okay with moving forward with the motion to changing jurisdiction. Nothing changes financially by any stretch of the imagination. You still, very little is being done at this point in time to maintain the rail trails. Nothing changes. I do agree that moving forward, there might be, well, there would be a need to come up with a maintenance plan. How are you going to achieve that? Now, how that happens doesn't necessarily have to take a lot of public funds. It depends on the willingness of different communities, different organizations and people in the community to adopt. I mean, sometimes you have adopt a street. You could have adopt a section of, there are so many ways to do this. I think that's a discussion that needs to be had. But I think there is no reason at this point in time not to have the motion to transfer just for jurisdiction purposes.
My only concern is knowing what I know about encroachment issues and the lack of funding or ability for the Conservation Commission to address those issues. The city has deeper pockets, and there's at some point you'll have to step up to address those. So not having the answer of how that, from legal counsel, this is one of those cases where if we had a city attorney sitting there, I could ask the
No, but
question.
in your packet was the conversation. You did have.
I know the
like-
conversation, but I've also sat in those meetings. So I'm proceeding with caution.
Okay. Thoughts from the council? Assistant Mayor Dameron?
Yeah, I think we can go ahead with this motion, but with a very clear understanding that if something untoward were to come up that we haven't discussed, or that's terribly unusual, or it's out of the ordinary, I'd be fully receptive to Mark Brislin to come back before us, presenting that particular challenge and giving us either what dollars are required or a way of handling it in another way, whatever. But I think we all ought to be open for that and encourage him to do so if something untoward were to happen.
So, is there anybody who would like to read the motion? And is there anybody who would like to second it?
It's a motion.
Right here.
Oh, okay, that's their motion.
You can have a different,
Oh, yeah. I'll make a motion that we approve, that the Claremont City Council approve handing off the oversight of the rail trail to the Parks and Recreation Department effective this meeting.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so that motion was read by Assistant Mayor Dameron and seconded by Councilor Pope. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Who said opposed? 2. So,
And then Nick?
Yes.
yeah, 2, yeah.
Okay.
Would you like me to do a roll?
Yeah.
You can go ahead and do that, yeah.
Counselor Assard?
Yes.
Counselor Ahern?
No.
Counselor Stone?
Yes.
Assistant Mayor Dameron?
Yes.
Counselor Kier?
Yes.
Counselor Klosky?
No.
Counselor Pope?
Yes.
Mayor Lovett?
Yes. Okay, so the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go back up to Resolution 2018-34, Whitewater Reservoir Spillway. That is also slated for a public hearing. You can find it on page 79 of your packet. So, Mr. McNutt, would you like to speak to this before we read the resolution, or we'll just move right into the resolution?
If you guys have questions.
Okay. So, who would like to read the resolution?
I'll give it a
All
shot.
these takers.
There we
Okay,
go.
Counselor Pope.
Let me just enlarge this text. Okay, here we go. This is Resolution 2018-34, Whitewater Reservoir Dam Spillway. Be it resolved by the Claremont City Council after a public hearing duly noticed that whereas by Resolution 2007-14, the City Council established a City Forest Management Fund, also known as the Fund, pursuant to RSA 34:1-A for the maintenance, operation, and management of city-owned undeveloped land to be funded by the proceeds from the sale of timber harvested according to the city's forest management plan, and whereas the City Council found that there's a need for maintenance and improvements to the Whitewater Reservoir Dam Spillway, also known as the Spillway, to protect the integrity of the dam and the safety of the city water supply, and whereas the City Council further finds that the maintenance and improvements to the spillway is the type of management of city-owned land intended by the establishment of the fund. Now therefore be it resolved to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum of up to $154,000 for maintenance and improvements to the Whitewater Reservoir Dam Spillway, and be it further resolved that the city manager or his designees are hereby authorized to withdraw the sum of up to $154,000 from the City Forest Management Fund for the purpose of maintenance and improvements to the Whitewater Reservoir Dam Spillway, to have no impact on the tax rate, and also to undertake all actions to execute all documents that may be required to implement this resolution. 2/3 vote required.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
So the resolution was read by Counselor Pope and seconded by Counselor Stone. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Kolowski.
This is the one that went out to bid, had 3 bids, and then we were told during one of the budget, the DPW presentation, that the low bid was in question and they wanted to follow up and be able to have a.
We did.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to make sure, so everything met standards.
Yes, yeah, we received 3 bids. We're not selecting the lowest bidder because there's 2 main criteria to putting out a bid: accepting the most responsive and responsible bidder. And the first bid didn't meet those 2 categories.
Okay.
We don't have the confidence that they have the capacity to handle a job this large.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And this is one of the items on the capital improvements plan? Mr. McNutt?
I'm sorry, what?
This is one of the capital improvement items?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
I just thought I saw the counselor's hand go up.
Anything else? Okay, this is slated for a public hearing. I'll open it up to the public. Anybody wishing to speak on this?
Yeah, just my 2 bits as a now retired forester, formerly employed by UNH Cooperative Extension. Yeah, this I think is a very good example of the benefits of of managed forest land, in this case publicly owned by the city, but those benefits directly translating into improvements for which the purpose of the land and the ownership mainly exists, that it's around a reservoir. And I don't think it takes much stretch of an imagination, perhaps, to realize that at least some of what I've been reading, the next big resource fight, if you will, is going to be for water, clean water, and we are really blessed with lots of good sources of that, and one of those primary sources, of course, being the Whitewater Brook Reservoir. So I'm just personally happy to see that come to fruition, and that they're taking advantage of the income produced by that land, growing trees and giving off and resulting in the benefits while they're growing, as well as when they're harvested and afterwards. So I commend you all for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. This requires a 2/3 vote. Are there any more questions or comments before we vote? Roll call, please.
Counselor Sard?
Yes.
Counselor Ahern?
Yes.
Counselor Stone?
Yes.
Assistant Mayor Dameron?
Yes.
Counselor Kier?
Yes.
Counselor Klosky?
Yes.
Counselor Pope?
Yes.
Mayor Lovett?
Yes. Okay. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. We can take a break now, or we can do 2 quick items and then get the finance director out of here, if she would like to go home. Up to you. You ready for a break, or?
I heard break.
Break. Okay, sorry.
I got the chart. You got
An 18 airport budget, Ms. Walter?
So the airport budget is one of those where we take in the revenue after we sell the gas, so it's usually a wash. And we never know. Usually I over budget it, but last year we didn't. We under budgeted it. And the price has been climbing so quick that when they had a chance to take half a load and share that with Newport, Brian wanted to jump at the chance and do that. And since we get it on offsetting revenue and whatever's left in the tank at year end, I have to do an inventory adjustment, so it'll come back off that side anyway. But I need to raise and appropriate it now with offsetting revenue to come in. So it's just a wash, but it's a technicality that we need to do. So I put together a budget for you, a motion for you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of them that I can.
Before we read the motion, are there any questions for Ms. Walter? No? Who would like to read the motion? Councilor Kowalski, are you able?
I'm fully hydrated from that Snickers bar now. Motion to overspend the 2018 airport budget. Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Claremont, New Hampshire, after public hearing duly noticed, to overspend the 2018 airport budget. Account number 01-472-360-0000, as approved, by up to $20,000 for the purchase of aviation fuel. Such expense to be offset by increased revenue from the sale of aviation fuel. Such department over expenditure shall not exceed the total bottom line appropriated for 2018. Be it further resolved that the city manager or designees are hereby authorized to execute all documents and undertake all actions as may be required to implement this resolution. This does require 2/3 vote, dated this 23rd day of May, 2018.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so the motion was read by Councilor Kowalski, seconded by Assistant Mayor Dameron. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. No, I can't do that, sorry.
Okay, in a
I
public
have to
hearing?
do 2/3 vote. Roll call.
Wait, don't we have a public hearing first?
Counselor Sard?
Okay.
Yes.
Counselor Ahern?
Yes.
Counselor Stone?
Yes.
Assistant Mayor Dameron?
Yes.
Counselor Kier?
Yes.
Counselor Klosky?
Yes.
Counselor Pope?
Yes.
Mayor Lovett?
Yes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the transfer of funds between departments. Again, that's Ms. Walter.
So usually I'm here to talk about welfare about this time of year, but they still appear to be doing quite well. However, the highway department got crucified this year with salt and sand and ice and God knows what else. I've been telling you that we're gonna need to come, and we just wanted to finish up with all the winter expenses to know exactly where we stand. So they're gonna need, pretty close to 48,000, so I'm asking you to transfer money. The assessing department, we have not been able to find an assessor. We have still had to have MRI, and they're gonna be a little bit short if we wanna keep having Joe come to be able to get caught up on what we need to do for this fiscal year to get tax bills out. And I'm asking 10,000 for that, and to transfer it from the police department, who right now is looking at having about $250,000 left in their budget. So the total amount to be transferred from the PD's budget is 58,000, and this can only be done with council approval. So there's a motion in front of you for that.
Assistant Mayor Dearman, I was
Yeah.
looking at the figures.
Yeah, yeah, just simply the police budget with up to 250,000, coming mostly from salaries, benefits?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And I know he's gonna ask to encumber some of that as part of that budget presentation that we already gave you the first run on, but there's still gonna be plenty left in here for this, to be able to do this.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, who would like, Councilor Kowalski?
Motion to transfer funds between departments. The Claremont City Council, pursuant to Article 3, Section 45 of the Claremont City Charter, hereby authorizes the city manager or his designees to transfer the following sums of money between departments, such funds having been raised and appropriated in the 2018 city budget. Transfer to Streets and Roads budget 441 in the amount of $48,000. Transfer to Assessing budget 414 in the amount of $10,000, and transfer from the police budget 421 the amount of $58,000. The total to be transferred $58,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it was read by Councilor Kowalski, seconded by Councilor Kier. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, next on the agenda is auction update. I think that's you.
Okay, so. Willing to take any questions. I don't know exactly what I'm updating about the auction.
Okay, when is it happening, all the details? In case, I know it's been publicized, but this is yet another opportunity to do that.
Okay, the tax deed properties auction will take place on June 2nd this year at 11 a.m. It will take place at the Claremont Savings Bank Community Center. There's approximately 6 properties. Well, there's not approximately. There's literally 6 properties that are going on auction. 4 of those are land only. So we got 5 Stathers Road, 7 to 9 Prospect Street, 30 West Pleasant Street, which is one of the land onlys. That was a demolition. 235 Hanover Street. That's a land only. Providence Ave is vacant land. There was never a structure there. And 20 Goulet Ave is land only. That was a demolition.
Okay. So I know I've asked this before, but again, this is just an opportunity to re-advertise this. The abutters to these properties have been notified. Yes.
Yeah, there's special provisions to notify abutters.
Yep. Councilor Kowalski?
Hey, it's me again.
Snickers really kicked in.
Yeah.
Usually with auctions, and I haven't been able to find it. I didn't really dig that far onto the auctioneer site.
Sure.
There's normally pre-qualifying. I don't know if that actually applies to municipal tax deed auctions or not, but I was curious if that does apply, if we could add that to the bottom of the calendar listing.
Okay. I'm not aware of any pre-qualifications that apply.
Okay. So normally they just like to know that you have funds deposited and you actually can go through with the purchase of the property. So I don't know if that applies to municipal tax deed auctions, but
Yeah,
all.
okay. I mean, that
would be good to know prior to you actually getting there and realizing that you didn't give them sometimes you bring a letter from your bank saying you're able to actually bid. I don't know if they have any of those qualifications, but I would like to see us sell these properties. So,
Okay, yeah, I can look into adding that disclaimer.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right, so that's the update. And then the final agenda item is preparations for Memorial Day and Alumni Day weekend.